You can't see the trees for the forest. You're so used to looking at the big picture, and you can see it 5-10 years into the future. You know how many years you've spent working on this. It becomes very difficult to take all of that everythingness and know, I need this tree, I need this bush, I need this flower. That forms my story, and everything else I can forget for now. It's really hard to do that. And so I saw my job as a consultant to be that landscape architect, to continue the metaphor, and help them see this part's really compelling. This part does double duty. I love when anything can do that in a pitch, where it not only conveys the idea of the product, but also some key strategic insight that makes you unique in the investable founder.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Heather Lawver. Heather is a serial entrepreneur and AI innovator who has helped early stage founders raise over $220 million in venture capital. After launching her first venture at 13, she went on to outmarket Warner Brothers in a landmark boycott at 16, reshaping digital copyright for the internet age. Now she's using her entrepreneurial and storytelling expertise to lead Stimo AI, an AI platform to help founders brand, pitch, and market their startups with ease. Congrats on launching your first venture at 13, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you so much, Karl. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you talk about something that so many founders struggle with, which is the art of pitching, how to explain their value in a way that other people can understand. And it's something that, even though the kind of pitch is considered an early stage startup thing, it's something that even later stage companies that are going for their like Series B, Series C, or just pitching to anyone like clients or other, they go about it in the wrong way. And it's I love to hear like your approach that is what has made it work so well for the $220 million you've raised for founders. What's the secret there that so many people keep missing?
I think the biggest secret, it really fits in with what you were saying earlier. It's human to human connection. So many times founders go into pitches thinking, how can I squeeze everything I need to say into this 3 to 5 minutes, or worse, 10 to 15. And they think it's an info dump. They think it is everything in the kitchen sink, overwhelm them with info. If they can just see how big and massive it is, they'll love it too. And it's the exact backwards way to go. You want to make sure, first and foremost, your number one goal is you want to be understood, and you want to make a connection with the human on the other side of the pitch. And you can't do that if you're just word vomiting at people. So it really has to be, what is a compelling story? How do I get that person to understand the idea and then be excited to learn more? And that's it. And once you simplify it that way, it's so much easier.
Yeah, the info dump and that approach just never works, because especially for early stage founders, if you don't have a recurring revenue and a product out there to market that, you don't really have a business yet. They're investing in you, they're investing in your team, and so they want to know more about you and why you're the right people to get this to market. And then when you're out also pitching, the person you're pitching to, they're not going to write you a check that day. They're going to go, and so all the technical stuff that you're so excited to share about, they don't understand or care. They have a whole team back in their headquarters or office that are subject matter experts, that they'll basically say, hey, here's all the due diligence we need to do on this. Go through it with a fine-tooth comb and find all the nasty things that they didn't want to include in the pitch in the first place, because it's not quite as polished as you made it out to be. So just not understanding the pitch process for early stages is one other big pitfall that I see that your approach helping them avoid. But also then, even if it's a second or third round of funding for an established business that's scaling, it doesn't matter how excited you are about your product, you need to understand what's going to get them to care about it. And it's not, or very rarely ever, the same thing.
Yes. That's another big thing. And honestly, I think it's one of the biggest stumbling blocks for underrepresented founders, is that they're not familiar with the language of venture capital. how much of that is unintentionally gate kept in a way, because so many investors assume that the Silicon Valley founder knows these rules already. And if you step into that room and you very clearly don't follow the rules, it's an instant no. They're going to think, oh, you don't know what's ahead as a founder, or you don't know what the next stage is going to be. It's a real quick way for them to say no. And it's also often that the founders don't understand, what is the investor really investing in? What are they looking for? Does this fit their thesis? Do they even realize how many pitches those investors hear every single day? How little time the investors actually read a pitch? Their number one job is to get to know as quickly as possible. So a big part of the money that we have helped founders raise is helping them decode that language of venture capital, to understand the person that you're pitching to, and then making sure that that short, very concise story is told to convey who you are and what you do and why it matters, but from a perspective that an investor is going to give a damn about.
Yeah, and it's that story that is carrying all that weight and really has that emotional hook, and like the understanding that what you're trying to get from that first pitch is not closing the deal. It's just, let's book another meeting.
Yes.
It's only just to, let's get to the next step, and you're not trying to jump up the entire staircase. It's like, we're just trying to get to the next, like the due diligence step, where then you'll be talking about all the tech and the science and all the nitty gritty stuff that you thought you had to cram into this initial pitch deck. But the first one is almost always, especially if you're like early starting off, is like, here's why here's how we're the right people to do this, and the timing is right, and like where our expertise is right, and then we're a safe bet for you to make for your VC, because you have to understand what they're looking for, what their values are, how you fit into their portfolio. So the more you can know about them and tailor your message to them, the better off it's going to be, rather than just feature dumping, or just like, here's all the tech that you are really excited about, but they're going to make their eyes glaze over and them start swiping their phone looking for like what they're going to order from Grubhub on the next day. Like,
yes, that's so true. I think one of the best compliments I've ever gotten on a deck or anything else was from one of my investors, who initially started as a no, and he turned into a yes after. I mean, I was just trying to follow up and be kind and thankful that in our initial pitch meeting, he gave me advice, and his advice made me think, and it made me completely restructure the deck. And all I did was send him a thank you note and say, hey, would you mind taking a look and seeing if this makes more sense now? I literally just wanted his advice. I was not angling for anything more than that. He'd said no. And he was so impressed by A, the thank you note, and B, that I was coachable, that no turned into a yes. And then he told me about a year later, Heather, you make it easy to believe in you. And I went, A, that's a great compliment. But B, I think that's the core of early stage pitching. You want to make it easy for that investor to believe in you. And the best and easiest way to do that is through a really good story and that human to human connection.
Yeah, I love that, because one, the follow up and just like the thank you for the advice just shows strength of character, but then also the coachability is a big factor that I've heard other VCs talk about, that they look for that, because if they're going to be, if you're getting into a relationship with this VC firm, they're going to be working with you, and if you're not going to listen to them, then they're just going to avoid that headache of trying to kind of lead a horse to water and have you never take any drinks in, like, and whatever metaphor you want to use there. But it's just like they don't have time to pull teeth, or like going to force you to do something you don't want to do. So if you're not coachable, because you might know the tech or the science or the product, but it's like especially early stage, you probably don't know the business that well for a first time founder, and there's so much you don't know that they know and their team knows. And so but if you're not willing to listen, then they're not going to try and teach us. So I'm not surprised that when you followed up saying, hey, I made changes based on your feedback, how does this look? Does this make, and thank you again for the feedback initially, that was it went from a red flag to a green flag of she's actually worth working with, because she listens, and is also just the conscientiousness and the showing that lack of ego. So you got the feedback and like, oh, this is helping me, not like this is an insult to my genius. How dare you assume that insinuate I don't know what I'm talking about or how to make a pitch deck. So when you're first starting to work with a client or like a startup or founders, what are some of like the first steps you kind of look for to make sure that they've got some of these foundational things right with their story? Because I imagine you walk in there and they just start like feature dumping at you. You're like, well, hang on, this is I have a lot of work on. What's kind of the first steps you look for or things you do with a client to make sure that they're on the right path or making that pivot in their approach to pitching?
Back when I first started the company, before we did software, and I was 100% consultancy and doing all of this by hand, we did the info dump. I let the founder get it out of their system. That they wanted to tell me all the bells and whistles and all the things, and I designed this big long quiz that asked them everything. And it was amazing to me how once they got that out of their system, they felt better. They felt heard. They felt understood. But I think the hardest thing, and I've fallen into this trap myself, even as a pitch deck expert, whatever, that you almost have, you know, that phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees. For founders, it's the opposite. You can't see the trees for the forest. You're so used to looking at the big picture, and you can see it 5-10 years into the future. You know how many years you've spent working on this. It becomes very difficult to take all of that everythingness and know, I need this tree, I need this bush, I need this flower. That forms my story, and everything else I can forget for now. It's really hard to do that. And so I saw my job as a consultant to be that landscape architect, to continue the metaphor, and help them see this part's really compelling. This part does double duty. I love when anything can do that in a pitch, where it not only conveys the idea of the product, but also some key strategic insight that makes you unique in the investable founder. Anything that you can pull from that forest that helps to accomplish multiple things at once helps to trim down that pitch and make you extra investable. So after that experience of the info dump, that process went a long way toward developing the software and our AI pitch chatbot that now does what I used to do. And it goes through that same process. It lets them get it out of their system and then helps them cherry pick out the best highlights to then form that perfect 2-minute pitch.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that I love that insight about. They can see they can't see the trees for the forest because they've been through the whole thing. They're super immersed. They have all the emotional connections to all these things that other people aren't emotionally connected to, and they see all the different connective tissue that, again, if you're just looking at from a layperson's perspective, you don't know all the different details about all the context and stuff. So it's having someone who can walk in with a chainsaw and like trim down the stuff that's not necessary and leave with a very nice like sculpted shrubbery of that goes, oh wow, that's beautiful what you've built. Let's talk more. Versus it's like the overgrown like hedges and forestry. Like, yeah, I'm not going to try and wade through that. I'm going to get lost and like you have to send a rescue team to try and pull me out with a bunch of dogs and like track me down in a week when I'm not back.
Yeah, no one needs a giant labyrinth or corn maze for their first pitch. They need a nice, lovely shrubbery.
Yes. I like that description because it really the one was like the flip of like forest for the trees, not the trees for the forest, because there is so much that they think is, and it's all important, it's all special to them, but like just having somebody can help them put it into the context of their audience is so important. Because the story is really not about them, it's about the value they're going to add, not even just for the customers, but also the value they add to the VC and all the different things, like the ways you can de-risk them as an investment for the VC, because there's all, like I said, that coachability, all these other things that they're not what the customer is going to care about, but it's what the investor is going to care about. You have to because like I've seen also people going to like a sales pitch practically. It's like, no one's buying your thing in this meeting. Like, stop trying to sell to the VCs. But so like knowing the audience and what they actually care about is something I can imagine you're good at helping people pivot that. So when you mentioned like a little bit like the follow-up you sent, but like, is that another area where you could see the like investors that you work with like improve after, is like the follow up and like that keep things going? Because I imagine they do so many pitches that it can be easy for them to kind of get overloaded or miss opportunities because they didn't follow up. And so, what's kind of your best practices you found for uh, the post pitch follow up since you had such success with that? Is there like a system you devised that, or like a recommendation you make for people when they're trying to do follow up?
This is probably a little controversial because I've sat through so many. I mean, I've been in Techstars, I've been an advisor for Watson Institute, Founders Institute, so many generator, so many accelerators. And so many of them will tell you, get out the spreadsheet, get out the CRM, automate everything. And I'm just not that person. It works for a lot of people and that's great. But to me, it feels impersonal. It feels cold and automated. And every investment I've ever gotten was human to human. I paid attention to what their interests were. There's so much focus in founder training and startups to know your customer, know your customer, know your customer. And it baffles me that no one addresses that, know your investor. Because like you said earlier, this is a relationship that you're hoping will last a very long time. So don't you want to know whose money you're taking? Don't you want to know whose advice you're going to lean on? Don't you want to know who's going to be on your board? I mean, every founder worries about, oh, hostile takeovers. Is what happened to Steve Jobs going to happen to me? Best way to prevent that is to know your investor. But that also means it's a huge benefit when you do the follow-up. You can get to know, are they more of a relaxed communicator or do they want those follow-ups? Do they see those hardcore follow-ups as a good thing? As much as you can, do your due diligence ahead of time, find out who they know, find out who they've invested with. There is nothing wrong with reaching out to their portfolio companies and asking those founders, what was the process like? Do you have any advice? That's a good thing. That's doing your legwork and knowing your customer. Just like you do customer discovery, do investor discovery. And I promise you it'll avoid so many headaches. And honestly, that truth really hit home for me in this past year, where last summer I had 3 months back to back of just the world's most terrible news. And I literally had to go to all of my investors and go, I just got a really tough medical diagnosis. And I thought, oh, they're going to hate me. We were worried we'd have to shut down the company, like that degree of bad. Thankfully, we're still here and everything's fine now. But every single one of them were perfectly lovely about it. And after every meeting, I walked away sighing, going, this is why I knew my investors. This is why I did the research. Because when shit hits the fan, you want to know that they're in your corner and they're in it for the right reasons. Because if you're just looking for check, if you're just looking for money, I guarantee you that'll bite you in the butt later. And in this situation, something's going to go wrong for every founder at some point. And you want to know they're in your corner. And so if you start with the follow-up and you start with the investor discovery, it'll pay off later.
Yeah. Again, first of all, congratulations for being around and making it through the difficult 3 months. And yeah, that advice I think is golden, because so often founders are just so hungry for the check that they'll take from anyone, and then they realize down the line that it's like just a transactional sort of relationship. And so when things go sideways, there's not the kind of buffer around that transaction, and there's no relationship to keep it going and supportive. So doing the diligence to get to know who you're taking the money from and who you're starting this connection with is really important. Even though it might hurt to turn down what looks like a big amount of money from someone that doesn't match your values, doesn't really gel with you on a personal level, it's worth holding out for someone who's really going to support you in more ways than just the check, because there's so many things that can go wrong and will go wrong, and it's not something you can't, there's no backseas when you're taking that like investor money. You're in it for the long haul, like a decade or so. And so it's going to be much easier to avoid the hassles and much cheaper to avoid the hassles than trying to fix something that you should have avoided in the first place. So
yeah.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry. If all you're after is a check, go get a loan, look for grants, look for SBIR, STTR. If all you need is a check, do it that way. Venture's awful expensive if all you need is a check. But venture can be great if you recognize the non-monetary value and contributions that the investors can provide. And as much as investors do due diligence on you, you gotta do your due diligence on them. Because there are some sharks out there.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, that's such a great point to kind of wrap it up. So thank you so much for connecting with me today, Heather. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and subscribe. If you want to learn more about myself or Heather, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.